Terrific. Thank you very much, Arthur. Very happy to be here. My name is Sonia Lapinsky. I'm, as you said, a managing director with AlixPartners. I've spent over half my career in consulting working with retailers, brands, wholesalers, helping with operational transformations, and reinventing their product-to-market processes, which is exactly what we're going to talk about today. I've always been in product. Prior to joining Alix, I spent years in design, manufacturing, and development, including 3 years in Shenzhen, China, actually living and breathing product and helping develop and produce over there. So definitely a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Really quickly, AlixPartners, we're a global consulting firm. We've got about 1,500 consultants around the world. Retail is our largest practice area, where we have more than 100 senior leaders who are helping customers and really retailers today with some of the most pressing questions. We've got deep analytics, tailored approaches that help us drive value-driven solutions. But really, we're known for our ability to implement, and this is really our passion. We're operators first and foremost, so none of this is really meaningful unless we can actually see the results and help our clients improve in this really competitive space. So, what are we here to talk about today? What is the sacred cow? The development process is that sacred cow we run into at all of the clients that we work with. Historically, we've had a very long, slow development process that we're not allowed to touch. Retailers are hinged to this process because they thought it's been proven to give them the results, but it's no longer valid. And what we see today when we go into different clients is that we're looking at excessive approvals, too many people involved in the process, duplicative work happening in silos in many different locations. And we all know one thing, that cows are not known for their speed and flexibility. The problem is we've got a customer and we've got a process, and they're completely misaligned. Today's customer is constantly bombarded with influences. They're on their phones, they're in social media, they're getting influences in fashions and trends from culture, from Instagram, from fashion bloggers. They want what they see and they want it now. It's not surprising that their preferences are changing as quickly as they are. And that's completely counter to how the development process works in retailers and apparels today. We're generally relying on a 6 to 12 month schedule. It's rigid, it's relying on old data, and it's expecting the consumer to like what we're designing today when it reaches the store 6 months from now. So it's completely conflicting. We're not supplying what the customer needs in this world of instant gratification. What are the behaviors that we're seeing? So basically we're seeing, because these two things don't align, we're seeing a lot of excess cost, time, and slowness in the process. What the retailers are forced to do is basically they're designing an entire development cycle and an entire line, and then they realize once they're coming up to the market that they're wrong. They've missed that critical bomber jacket that's supposed to be the next fashion trend. So they're reworking and they're redoing all of that design and development work to chase back into those winning styles. That means that they have duplicative efforts across the entire product-to-market process. The designers are redoing their work, the developers are redoing their work, and our suppliers all over the world are having to do that as well. You can just see the cost that's being incurred in that process. It also ends up in a ton of excess waste as we're forced to get rid of all the excess development and samples that we've acquired along the way. So what do we need to do? I mean, I think it's pretty clear that retailers have to figure out how to be more accurate and how to be faster. We need to streamline the process, understand what the customer really wants, and tailor our process so that we can react to it and that we can get the right product into customers' hands when they want it. It seems pretty logical, but for some reason, it just doesn't happen. All right, we're seeing a lot on the page, but I think what we're trying to get across is that there's 3 different inputs into fixing the way that we improve our accuracy and speed. Historically, we've been trying to get customers or get retailers to move faster. So we've got a typical development cycle that's either 6 months, 8 months, 12 months long, and we're trying to reduce it from a few months here or there. We're trying to get closer to market so we can get the trends and be more right and be more accurate. Maybe if we're really innovative, we have a speed-to-market calendar that allows us to develop a few styles really close to market and benefit from as much information as we can. What we're seeing now is that the really innovative retailers are kind of throwing that model away and saying we don't just need one calendar, and we don't need one plus a speed capsule. We need to think about multiple models. So what we need to do is understand how do we layer on multiple different speed models so that we can be constantly refreshing product, and we can constantly get the customer input into that product so that we're delivering what they want, that newness, that freshness, that difference when they're looking for it. In the middle, I think most of us have figured out how to develop a structured assortment architecture. We know what the fashion pyramid looks like. We can develop into the core basics, the fashion at the top of the pyramid. But what we need to do now is tie these two things together. We need to take our development models. We've got our slow and steady real margin drivers that maybe don't need to be quite as quick. We need to layer on those multiple speed models on top. We need to understand what it means to develop really seasonlessly, and then we need to tailor our assortment so that every level of that assortment architecture fits into one of our development and supply chain models. That's just part of the puzzle, though. The final part we need is really to understand how do we incorporate what the customer is really asking for. So again, if you'll remember, we've got this customer who's constantly being influenced by social media and everything they're looking at their phone day to day, and the retailer is using data that's 6 months old or 12 months old from the performance that's happening in store. That's completely not helping our situation. How do we get real data-driven consumer insights pushed into the development process at the right time? So we're working with real consumer insights that help actually support what we're designing and that we're designing the right thing. Technology. We've never been in a place like we are today where technology can help us and support both our ability to be more right and to be faster, and more importantly, to take cost and out of the process and put margin back in. There is so much cost in the development cycle today. We've got sales samples where we work with retailers who can be spending 1% to 2% of total sales on samples that they're used to sell to their clients. That's mostly for brands and wholesalers. We've got development samples, which are hidden and buried in the cost of goods. We don't even know how much they cost. Every time we have to look at a product, make changes, ask for a new proto, and review it and resample and do it again. That's all buried cost that's eating into our margin. We've got fit models that can be hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. But more importantly, they take time out of the calendar. Every time we want to do a new fit, test it on a new model, that means weeks in the development process. And then finally, we've got the testing process. So the archaic process is say we're going to develop a whole range of product, we're going to put it in stores, try and get some results, and then see what happens. The problem is we get variable results we can't rely on because generally we're going to be testing outside of the normal seasonal development or normal season that it's supposed to be in the store. Plus, we've got all the time and cost that it took to get those products into the stores. It just doesn't work. Today, we've got technology that can do and kind of take time and cost out of each step of the process. The challenge is, A, picking the right product. So how do we help retailers determine where they're going to invest, where they're going to put their time behind the right technology, and then which one's going to get them the most bang for their buck? Is it going to be in real online consumer testing, which we found has great results and doesn't have any of the cost of in-store testing? Or is it going to be in reducing all of our sales samples so that we can move to digital samples instead and selling off of CADs and selling in a new and modern format? One of the biggest challenges, though, is really, regardless of what technology we pick, we still have to do the change. And the change is the hard part. We need to change the process and how we work and how we think about looking at product before we can actually maximize the benefit of any of these technologies. When we think about helping improve the product-to-market process, we need to do it across all of these layers. We need to increase speed and be able to actually reduce the number of touch points in the process. So again, How do we think about the right use of technology to be able to eliminate touches on the product, eliminate the cost associated with that, but also be able to bring the product closer to market so that we know we're going to be more right faster. We've seen that this delivers real results in terms of higher margin in GMROI, which is your gross margin return on investment. The faster we are and closer to market and the more accurate we can be means we're making bets on the right product, and we're able to sell at a higher price point, and we don't have to clear as much excess inventory. That immediately contributes to your profitability. We have to reduce complexity, shifting approvals closer to the factory, reducing them all together. We want to reduce overdevelopment and really figure out how we can streamline the process end to end. Innovation is key when we're thinking about how to compete in today's retail environment. We've got to think about, again, back to those models. How do we think about development seasonlessly? There's no reason now to have an archaic 4 seasons per calendar year. Why can't we deliver product seasonlessly the way customers expect it today? They're looking online every day and seeing new product, and they're expecting the same thing when they're in stores and when they're on retailers' websites. How do we help them do that? And then finally, what about the costs associated with this really expensive and outdated process? Again, with the combination of being faster, seamlessly driving the process, and enabling the process with benefit of technology, how much cost can we actually take out? There's real ability to maximize profitability here, be more innovative, and streamline the entire process. This isn't an easy feat. Again, one of the reasons why many retailers are so slow to change is because it's really hard. This touches every functional area across the development process. It's not like you can just go in and work with one team and convince them that there's a real urgency to change and a really positive result that they can see from driving this change. We have to convince everyone along the spectrum from the beginning of the development cycle with the merchandising and planning teams, through the designers, the materials and development folks, into our sourcing and development offices, which might be here or they might be around the world. And then we still have to work with the logistics team. There's not hardly a functional area that we don't touch. So the change is hard. It's cross-functional, and there's also competing priorities that we've got to get folks over these hurdles. We had a number of strategies that are really successful in doing this. I think one of the biggest questions we get is how do you manage the change? How do you actually drive change when you're dealing with these many different functional silos and these many different competing priorities? And I think the best thing we've learned is that you just need that test case. You need to get the team that wants to be the lead team and raise their hand and say, we're going to be the ones that are going to innovate, we're going to do things differently, and we're going to get a quick win. And as soon as you can show that quick win where they managed to develop a capsule that has had a huge bump, a 600 basis point bump in margin, and we can show that to the rest of the teams, that's a recipe for success. What AlixPartners does is we help to provide some tools that help get this done faster. So again, we've got to work with each of the teams. We've got a number of different ways that we can help move this process along. So again, we want to make sure we're understanding the entire assortment architecture and how do we improve that so that it ties into the process better. Where are all the resources today? Where are they located in the world? What are they doing? Is there duplicative work happening? And how do we rebalance that so we're focused on speed and flexibility? In many cases, that means we need to take the work and move it closer to the factories wherever they happen to be. We have to leverage the talent and the capabilities of the folks who are doing this on the ground day to day, and we have to be able to do it faster and develop that trust. We need to streamline the development process, as I've talked about, taking steps out of the process, leveraging technology, and doing whatever we can to just make sure we're streamlined and nimble. And before we even start, we need to make sure we understand where the capabilities are. We might be an organization that's super strong in merchandising, but we're not so strong on the development side, or maybe it's the inverse of that. If we don't know where we're starting, we're not sure of what the work needs to be done to get to where we need to go. So it starts with a really thorough understanding of our capabilities across the organization. We've got some great examples of wins. So when retailers are open to change and we can actually show them some quick wins and drive change, it has really meaningful results. We've got a few examples here, and I don't think we need to go into all of them. But the big takeaway is that there's meaningful dollars associated with this if we do this right. We worked with a footwear company, a multi-billion-dollar footwear company, who had many, many rounds of samples in order to get a final approval of a new product before it went into stores. They knew that was only part of the problem. We had to not only develop them, we had to ship them around the world. They were generally being manufactured in China and Vietnam. We had to store them, manage them. It was cost, it was people, it was time. It was excess around the world. It was preventing them from being nimble at all. They were doing generally about 6 development samples on average per style. When we identified parts of the process that they could eliminate, they could shift work overseas to their partners in the factories who were already doing it. So we were reducing duplication, we were leveraging the capabilities that already existed, and we were driving speed to take them down from 6 samples for development to maybe 1 to 2. We took out something like $3.5–4 million in costs. It was a huge win, and I think there's even more ways to even drive that further. This was even before we had the technology that we have on hand today. There's also, if you see on the far right example, a really good example of looking at the entire product-to-market process. So again, if we're going to drive meaningful results, we have to consider every one of those steps of the process and where the big roadblocks are. If we can address them and take time out of the calendar, improve our merchandising processes, tie our assortment architecture into our development cycles, be more nimble and innovative with those seasonless development cycles, and then really think about how do we incorporate consumer insights up front, early and often, we can make meaningful impact on our ability to drive margin. And in this particular case, we were able to get 350 basis points improvement when it was really tracked rigorously. So we're not just doing this to be speedy or to say we're speedy. It means when we're more right, we're driving real results. Finally, I think this is a really interesting little study that AlixPartners did back in April, and we looked at it also in October of last year. The graph on the left is showing the profitability performance of a number of public retailers. So we looked at 20 public retailers with revenues over $1 billion, and we put them into 2 different buckets. The green line represents what we called fast companies. And by this definition, it was just companies that could get new product onto the floor or online more quickly. It didn't mean they were necessarily fast fashion or what we know of fast fashion, but they were just delivering product more frequently as the consumers expected, versus the blue line, which are the slow companies. And what we found when we looked at their results is that their operating margins were generally 500 basis points higher for the fast companies than the slow companies. They were consistently beating their peers by 10 percentage points when we're looking at the fourth quarter. So that's a typical time where retailers are clearing product and having to mark down. But the companies who were delivering more often and being more right weren't having to do that. So it's super meaningful results. On the right side, the EBIT performance or the profitability performance is really because we're being more right, we're reducing inventory, we don't have to mark down product as much, we're getting higher sell-through at full price sales, and we're generally just delivering a better product with less of that clearance at the end.